Greetings, travelers of Hyrule. It's been almost a year since The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was released to the world. Please take a moment to let that sink in. Okay, we're good? Moving on. Since release, we've all been awaiting the announcement of DLC, so when we were told in an interview that there were currently no plans for DLC, well, the internet was on fire for a minute there. Personally, I wanted to wait with making this video until I felt absolutely certain that DLC wasn't just looming over the horizon like Ganondorf coming back in the opening Legend of Wind Waker. But I think it's been long enough, so today I want to discuss with you all, where does Zelda go from here? But before we get started, a quick shout out to everyone who supports these videos coming out, even if I'm slow sometimes, and stay tuned to the end of the video for more information on how you can support the channel. I feel like talking about this is a bit of a repeat, because I remember reading all these articles about where Zelda would go from Breath of the Wild, and it seems the answer was actually somewhat simple. There was a DLC, a Dynasty Warriors game, and a direct sequel. It's just that right now, it doesn't feel like these three things are really in the cards anymore. There's not much Tears of the Kingdom ads for a Dynasty Warriors spin-off to take inspiration from, and we don't seem to be getting a DLC this time around. In terms of sequels too, let's face it, this Link has already killed 2 incarnations of Ganon. I don't think any Link has managed that feat before, although I am willing to argue that Majora might have been worse. Whether or not you feel this Hyrule was worth a second visit or not, I think everyone, including the developers themselves, understands that we really can't make a third revisit. Or maybe Aonuma's just gonna prove me wrong, I guess, I don't know. Zelda as a series really likes to build their games around a new thing being added to it. Ocarina of Time's thing was that it was the first Zelda game in 3D, Majora's Mask's thing was that it had multiple playable characters, and of course there was the whole time thing as well. Wind Waker's thing was sailing the open oceans, Twilight Princess's thing was not being Wind Waker, I suppose. Oh, and Wiimote Waggle, but I think that was more of an afterthought. Skyward Sword's thing was precise motion controls whenever they felt like working. Breath of the Wild's thing was, hey, does this seem logical? Then you can do that. And then finally, Tears of the Kingdom's thing was, hey, does this seem logical? Then you can build that. To some people, I'd say the sudden shift to a gameplay style that saw players work on building and engineering rather than solving preformed puzzles was probably a little bit off-putting, but knowing the Zelda series' history, there's a good chance that this isn't what the next game is going to be at all. But what I'm trying to say with all this is that Zelda likes to change what it presents itself as with every game. Although some games definitely do take more from previous titles than others, most will stick to having a single gimmick and running with it. There's a few things we know for sure though. The series' producer seems to have fallen in love with the concept of the open world, and considers the older products, well, products of the time, with such memorable quotes like,
"Of course, the series continued to evolve after Ocarina of Time, but I think it's also fair to say now that we've arrived at Breath of the Wild in the new type of more open play and freedom that it affords. Yeah, I think it's correct to say that it has created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from."
And of course,
it's interesting when I hear people say, "I miss traditional linear Zelda," because I'm wondering, why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things or ways you can play?
why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things or ways you can play? With the producer feeling this way, it's hard to really envision a future with more linear Zelda styles returning at any moment. Of course, this is talking about 3D Zelda specifically. I wouldn't be surprised to see a new game using the bird's eye view perspective completely sideline all of this, though in part because Nintendo seems to see Zelda 2D as a filler release slot for the majority of the time, unfortunately. Here's where things get rough though. I don't think it's necessarily linear gameplay people want to return to. It's the more refined parts of the story and the story itself being more intricate. The dungeons having a clearer goal rather than being 4 to 5 shrine puzzles you see everywhere else, smushed together with very similar premises and goals to make up a temple. And overall the execution of the game feeling tighter in just the little things, like maybe voice acting.
It was all for nothing. So I really am just a failure. All my friends, the entire kingdom, my father most of all.
Depending on the type of player you are, you may feel like the world is utterly devoid of life or filled to the brim with it, because oftentimes you're just wandering across the plains, or in Tears' case, probably flying. There's really no major roadblocks anymore, as everything is designed to be accessible from the get-go, which I did think wore a bit thin in Tears of the Kingdom after having played so much of Breath of the Wild before it. But that doesn't mean I don't think linear gameplay and a more open-world approach to Zelda can't mix. It just means that I feel open-world Hyrule could benefit from not being set in a fantasy post-apocalyptic setting and having more life to it, perhaps not unlike the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Because as glorious of an achievement I feel Tears of the Kingdom is, it does have a lot of very tiny little shortcomings, and a few pretty major ones that keep me from feeling like it's a game that's supposed to be as timeless as its predecessors. Oftentimes, the repeated dialogue, non-voiced characters, and disconnected storytelling take me out of the experience entirely. Like how Link clearly talks to people in this game, but outright refuses to anyone to explain that the Zelda imposter is probably an imposter, since the real Zelda is the dragon we made along the way. I'm hoping that Aonuma this time will end up taking criticisms to heart a little bit better, and actually have us explore real, actual dungeons this time to break up the monotony of continuous open-world exploration, which is a bit of a problem for me in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So taking Aonuma for his words, what we can expect from Zelda going forward is more open world, and that he doesn't seem to understand what older fans are asking for when asked for a bit more linearity. I guess, bring on Breath of the Wild 3? Hopefully, someone can explain to him that people don't want to experience cutscenes out of order by then. Then the next question is less so what will the next Zelda game be, but when? Breath of the Wild took crazy long to develop. Development started around 2012, with the game being officially announced in 2014 and finally releasing in 2017. Similarly, with Tears of the Kingdom's development starting when production on Breath of the Wild concluded in 2017, it would have also taken 6 years, though the official statement was that it was 5 years of harsh development and a year of polishing, despite the fact that the game launched with a day 1 update. So that leaves us with a measly 1 or 2 years in between Tears of the Kingdom and the Switch's successor, assuming that's coming out this year or the next. However, that is also making the assumption that there was absolutely no split development happening whatsoever during the development of Tears of the Kingdom, which I would hope is not the case. Just like how Mario can have 4 separate games coming out this year, seriously, I would hope that at least someone somewhere has been working on any type of Zelda game so that maybe, just maybe, the next console won't have to be cursed to have no Zelda at launch. Otherwise, yeah, expect nothing for another 5 years. Horrifying. Seriously though, Nintendo has to know that launching a console alongside Zelda has been a winning formula, right? One thing I've not talked about throughout all of this is, of course, the potential of a remake or remaster. And that's because I don't think there's too much to talk about. It is Nintendo after all, so we all know something's on the horizon at all times when it comes to those anyway. It will, however, be interesting to see the sales of a remastered game after the incredible success that was Tears of the Kingdom. After all, Skyward Sword HD, despite outselling the original, has only managed to sell 4 million copies. And I'm wondering if that's because it was Skyward Sword, or because the fanbase garnered by Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom just doesn't seem to translate very well. Regardless, unless that remake or remaster somehow does much better than either Breath or Tears, I don't think it will influence the future of Zelda much in the long run. Thank you so much for listening along, and an extra special shout out to the YouTube and Patreon members who help fund this channel so that I can make more videos. If you want to support the channel in this way, check out the links in the description, and if you're not subscribed yet, well, why not? That one's free. As always, I'll see you in the next video, whenever and whatever that will be, so bye bye for now.